And we're back. Everybody joined. Let's see, Blake and Alex are still here, still sticking around because
Always.
you guys love Hitman. And we brought in Jeff Cork, Jeffrey Cork.
Hey,
How
Jeffrey
do you
Cork,
prefer?
here I am.
Should I say Jeffrey, Dr. Jeffrey, Professor Cork?
Oh,
Ooh.
let's just make Stolen Valor. I love it. Let's do it.
You recently wrote a cover story for GameInformer.com on Hitman 3. It's out now. People can read it. It's online in digital form. And if you're a subscriber, you should be getting the print magazine soon. But you did it. You wrote the story,
Yes, so read
and
it.
you're here to talk about it.
Thanks.
What's exciting about this one?
What's exciting about it?
Were you a Hitman fan before this?
I will say that I liked Hitman. I don't think I fully appreciate it until I went back just as preparation for the cover story. I went through and played like the Hitman 2016 all the way up to through Hitman 2 in its entirety, just as like a big marathon. And I think doing that really gave me a better appreciation for just kind of the whole Hitman experience. So I guess you could call me a fan. I think at the time that the original Hitman was released, I should say too that I did not have the stomach for playing it in an episodic form. I'm an impatient person, so I waited for the Game of the Year edition, and then got it that way. So
perfect. Hey, was it 2016 when that first one came out? The one that was episodic? I think it was around then.
Yep.
I remember playing that one a little bit and dabbling in it and being like, I'm more of a fan of old school Hitman, where it was a little more action packed, where these feel kind of like staged dioramas. It wasn't until Leo Vader joined the staff that I went and listened to him talk about it. He loved it, and just like the amount of gameplay that's in there. Like you can go in and you can walk around this world, and the way you interact with it and watching the systems play off of each other and doing like crazy setups to try to assassinate a person, like that's a lot of fun. So I went back to it, and I have a better appreciation for Hitman now, is where the story's going. And so I'm more excited for Hitman 3 than I would have been a couple years ago. All that said, do you talk about that a lot in the cover story about my excitement for Hitman?
Leo Vader.
It's predominantly what I spend most of the time
Okay.
talking about. If you remember that I did that interview with you, that was what about.
Yeah. That's what that was about.
Exactly.
Okay, I wonder why there were so many Hitman questions.
Yeah, I kind of to like build on what you're saying. I think that is one of the things that I think is like, I would say maybe a kind of a ding against Hitman is like it's very easy to play it like in a way that isn't as satisfying as if you really engage with it at the level that it's designed to be played. You know what I mean? Like you could just be a big dum-dum and alert all the guards and just keep like brute forcing your way through, and then just turn it into like what feels like a fairly mediocre shooter, which is like you could do that, but it is absolutely not as fun as really just being super methodical and like planning something out and finding like, okay, if I go this route, you know, this guard here patrol, I can kind of, this person's exposed if I do this, and I can't smuggle a weapon in, but if I find this thing that I mean, there's a lot of planning that I think is super satisfying when you pull it off. And having someone who I think is like an evangelist, kind of like a Leo, certainly helps with that. But I think once you are onboarded with it, I think to your point, the story I think is probably more engaging than I would have expected to. Like, and especially like playing what I did of Hitman 3, we got to play 3 of the 6 levels in it. I obviously don't want to spoil anything, but it definitely goes in some really, really interesting places narratively if you do engage with the game on that level. If you don't particularly care about the story, I mean, you can certainly skip cutscenes and just get right to the action, and it's still the same, like, super fun Hitman as before. But I think the story is really cool.
Does it seem like, it just based on what you're talking about with the story, that you really should have played Hitman 1 and 2 before diving into this one?
Yeah. I think it's one of those, like, technically you could jump in with Hitman 3 and just start right at the beginning, but you would be missing a lot of what makes the series kind of special. I think one of the things too that's really interesting about Hitman is that they've got that whole World of Assassination umbrella that everything is underneath, where basically it's all one united app if you're playing it on console or PC or wherever, where it's just like, this is Hitman. And if you've bought Hitman 1, that starts Hitman 1. But if you bought Hitman 2, it's all there. Just like you could just play through the entire story in one place. It's not like you're launching Hitman 1 and then when you're done, roll credits, then I move into Hitman 2. There's kind of this fluid nature of the series, so it all flows together nicely. So long-winded way of saying you should absolutely play the other Hitman games first.
Yeah, and they're fun games, it turns out. So
Oh, they're really
if you
great.
haven't played
Yeah,
them, you're in for a treat.
absolutely.
Blake, were you a Hitman fan before jumping into this?
Yeah, I like those games. I think in terms of like, immersive sim or immersive sim adjacent games, the Hitman games are kind of lower on the totem pole for me, but I still do appreciate what they do. Um, and seeing where they're going with 3, which really it doesn't, which I guess makes sense. It's the third in like this housed umbrella. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily radicalizing any of it. It's only iterating upon it and blowing it out. That I feel like each Hitman game at this point they make a big to do of like how big the levels are, and they are frankly astounding in this one. I don't think there's a few we can't talk about. I don't think, but like Jeff, I watched Jeff stream, and just walking around the level, it felt like its own contained open world in a way that
Mhm.
I don't know if the other ones did and of course they include like different story arcs and everything like all the other ones do. The thing I will say about this one is I think for people who are into Hitman, whether that be like kind of passive like me or mega fans, this looks like it might be a home run. I don't know if this is the one that's going to get people on board because again, it's just like more of that thing. But I think if you're into this series, like you're going to be stoked on what it offers and how it's kind of blowing out some of those systems people really like.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you talked about like the maps are bigger. Is there anything else that's
Yeah,
that's new? Like, what are they doing that's new?
I think for me the thing that stood out is we're talking to the team and they were saying like this is kind of the last entry in the trilogy. So they said like somewhat selfishly they wanted to include things for the fans, but also stuff that they wanted to put into the series for themselves, but just hadn't got around to it for whatever reason. And I think probably the best one example of that would be the level in England,
Yeah.
which is it's so cool. It's basically you start off and you can get a disguise for private investigator very early on, and then you can play the level like a murder mystery. Where with this disguise, which is optional, you could still go in as AG-47. All the guards will see you and alert you. But if you have this disguise on, you basically have free reign of this entire English manor, and you could talk to people, including the target, and figure out who killed this person by interrogating suspects and investigating the grounds for clues and finding hidden things. And that's just like one of the stories. All the Hitman games, there's like a different bunch of different routes you could take that's kind of unfold as you explore everything like that. So that's just one of them. And it takes quite a while to like fully solve it. There's like a couple of dead ends that you can go down as well. But it's really interesting kind of departure from the traditional Hitman games, and I'm really into it. It's super cool.
Yeah, I get the sense that with this one, IO is going for it in a lot of interesting ways. And like Jeff said, they brought up they're doing levels or like doing ideas that they had kind of had on the back burner for a while. And it makes me wonder how much of that is like IO as an independent studio being able to take those big swings. But like it does feel like a swan song in those ways, especially that level, which is so cool. And like, why the hell would you play it any other way than the murder mystery? Like, it is
Mhm.
pitched as a murder mystery, and it is so awesome that they're going for it
Yeah,
within the Hitman series in that way.
yeah,
Sounds really
absolutely.
fun. Did IO give you guys any insight into their development approach or what they're thinking about the series as a whole as they work on it?
Lake is thinking intently. I don't want to like jump on him, but it seems like
No,
they
I'm
basically
trying to
they
remember.
acknowledge how important the series is to the studio. I mean, it's basically their flagship. It was one of the first things that the studio did, and it's been just a consistent through line. Some entries have been, you know, better received than others, but
Yeah.
it's definitely something that the team is still feels is really important to them, just to like the core of their studio culture and everything. But I think at the same time, everyone is excited to kind of move on and try new things as well. There's kind of a I don't want to say like melancholy that's surrounded it, but it seems like there's kind of a sadness like last final semester of senior year kind of thing going on where it's like
Yeah.
we're saying goodbye to this iteration of Hitman at least, this trilogy. I think it's still going to be like they'll have a ton of updates and like the elusive targets, and they'll have like timed events and that kind of stuff. So the game will continue to be supported, I think, for quite a while after it launches in
Mm.
January. But I think the story is, from what I could tell, it seems like it is going to end. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. It'll be a definitive ending.
I think the biggest takeaway for me from talking to the development team is like a similar thing, like hearing them reflect on closing a chapter because I feel like their pipeline probably hasn't changed much in the last 5 to 6 years. You know, they're kind of just like iterating on what 2016 did, but they are also, I don't know if reckoning is the right word, but like dealing with the fact that they're now independent and this is their first independent game, and then they're kind of piecing out from Agent 47 for a little while to do some new IP and new projects. That conversation seemed to hang over everything they talked about,
Yeah.
except for the VR stuff, which did seem like it was quite a new venture for a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about VR, but also since you brought it up, like while you guys were in the middle of basically writing the cover story, I'm sure they announced that they were making a James Bond game, that they have that
Yeah.
license. Did they tease anything for you guys?
No. We asked and they said, no, stop.
It's
No,
not the
I mean,
cover story.
like, they gave us what you might expect from us asking about a game they had announced only like a working title for 2 days before. Basically, it was, like they, despite the fact that they've worked on several IP, 4 or 5 different IP, Hitman included, like they recognize, and I'm thinking specifically about the two heads of the studio right now. They recognize they're basically the Hitman studio as far as people are concerned,
Mhm.
and they do want to kind of not break away from that, but they want to be known for more. And so that's what they kind of like focused on when we asked about 007 is like, yeah, we're doing new things now and we want to be known for more than just Hitman. We still want to be the Hitman studio, but like the Hitman studio and the 007 studio and the this and hopefully the Kane and Lynch studio again. Please, Kane and Lynch 2 is so good.
You guys mentioned VR as well. What one thing I thought was interesting is this game will be available in VR, which is crazy. Because I'm curious to play it in VR, but then also it's exclusive to PlayStation VR, at least
Mhm.
initially. So it's not going to be available for any of your VR headsets on PC, at least initially, although that'll probably roll out later down the line. But if you want to play it in VR when it launches, you'll have to play it on PlayStation.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Well, all of the games are coming to VR as well. Like it's
Yeah,
not just
correct.
Hitman
Which,
3. Yeah.
well, I want to like dive in and play. So it's like a first person. Are you playing as Agent 47
Hmm.
in these
Yeah.
modes?
It's everything that you already know and like are familiar with in those games, just in VR.
That's really
Yep.
That's
cool.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the most interesting things about that, is just talking to the team, kind of rediscovering their game and
Hmm.
checking out locations that they thought they knew super well. But I think just by the nature of pulling it in to first person, then also having like a VR headset, it feels like it's a lot more of an intimate experience in a lot of ways. But like talking to the like producers of the VR mode, they were talking about just kind of like gaining a greater appreciation for the art team, because just a lot of details that you completely like, the thing that they uh brought up as an example was like, there's just one mission where you have to get some intel on a USB drive, and it's, I remember this mission, it's just like a tiny little USB drive, like it's like minuscule, it's like 2 or 3 pixels wide on your screen. They're saying like in VR you could get up close to it, and like that artist had created like a really highly detailed label for it and a light and all this other stuff. And they're saying like everything
Huh.
has that. So they're saying like guns, where they're like, oh, we're gonna have like the artists design this for iron sights now. It's like, no, all those worked. Like the hollow sights just worked. Like whenever the team was creating them, even though you would never use those because Hitman is like a third person game, you never saw those sites functioning. Just all that stuff had kind of already been done, all that legwork.
Was that kind
Yeah.
of maybe not the onus for putting it in VR, but did you get the vibe from them if they didn't have those steps in place already that VR would have been more difficult?
I think it absolutely would have been more difficult, but I think it was just, I don't want to say happenstance, because obviously the artists aren't just dinking around for their own merriment, but it was certainly work that it paid off. It seems like it was like an internally created decision too, to a lot of, like, there's some just evangelists for VR
Yeah.
within the studio, and then their passion basically led to the studio head just saying like, give it a shot, see what you can do, see if this works in VR, because like there is just as good a chance that like, oh no, this is awful in VR. It's unplayable.
Yeah,
Everybody pukes.
there's like it definitely. I got the sense it started as like a skunks work thing that they were just kind of dicking around with, and then as it gained traction within the studio, it's kind of retained that. Like it makes sense they're not going to allocate 200 people for the VR component of this game. Like it's still, I think maybe 20 people at most on that, and it's like because of how small and intimate that is, there's a lot of excitement for it right now, which is really cool.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to hear about a game working unintentionally in a completely new like perspective the way that game did. I'm very
Yeah.
curious to see some of that stuff up close.
Yeah, it would totally change the gameplay in kind of a weird way where you're presumably reaching out and interacting with things, and like you said, looking down the sights of the gun.
Well, they're adding
That sounds
stuff.
neat.
They're adding stuff to it too because you have like the motion that are. I don't know. Do you play with the motion controllers? Maybe.
No, use
Do you remember?
use a DualSense.
Oh, okay. But like they're adding stuff to it too, where 47 can like mess with people in the world because when they are like testing the game, people want to reach out and just like touch people's faces. So they're
Mhm.
also like adding whole new features for you to like bend this world and be kind of like mischievous in it in interesting
Yeah.
ways.
I should clarify
People giving
too.
you a weird look when you touch their face.
Yeah, I should clarify. It's a Dual Shock 4 because the game is like a PS4 because of the VR.
Oh, right.
Right.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a good clarification.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Cool.
they're like the Blake's, but they're talking about like the being able to like push your hand against somebody's face, and then also like there's like a drummer who's like playing in the hall in like one of the passageways in Miami level, and she was saying that you could just like reach out and as his hand is striking the drum, just like interrupt it, and just if you want to just be, it's like a jerk simulator. It seems like.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to do that,
Yeah, absolutely.
but
I
I imagine it would hurt.
I am like very curious. Violence in games does not offend me. I'm fine with
Mhm.
it. But put more in it, I say. But in VR, I am very curious to see what some of that will feel like because there's you're by design eliminating a lot of the distance you have between something like a game where it's so personal. And I'm very curious if like if I'm stabbing a dude in the face in Hitman VR, like how is that going to read to me in my brain? And we asked him about that, and they were like, "Yeah, that's something we considered, and we made the decision not to tone it down," which like obviously isn't within their right. Like if they want to do that, that's fine, but it will be interesting because it's a brutal game when you are choking someone to death in that game. And you're doing it in first person and having that like situational awareness. I'm really curious
Mhm.
how people react to
Sure.
it. I don't know how I'll react to it. Maybe it's whatever, and I'll love choking people out in
Yeah,
VR
I
and
think it'll
killing them.
probably
But
take away some of the glamour that
It'll
we
awaken
associate with
something in you.
drowning someone in a toilet. You'll see, like,
yeah,
oh, this isn't cool, actually.
yeah. Like I
I
mean,
should stop doing that.
it's always gonna be funny to knock someone out with a muffin, but I don't know if I'm gonna love like point blank executing someone in VR.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's very weird.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, we'll learn more next year when we play it in VR.
We'll learn a
Cool.
lot
Well, that's
about
good talk.
ourselves.
Do you guys want to tease any of the features you're going to put up on the site throughout the month? What should
Yeah,
people look forward
Alex Van Aken, he's got a rapid fire interview coming up and got some other stuff, which is quite possibly the worst tease. I don't know.
I I got a slightly better one, I guess, than stuff. Is I talked to the two heads of IO about them being an indie studio, and that happened honestly through failures. Maybe failures not the right word, but like Hitman 1 coming out and not performing in Square Enix's mind, who was their parent company at the time, and they had to like make some tough calls where they had to do a management buyout because Square had put them up for sale. They went through a round of layoffs, and now they're this wholly independent studio. So we talked to the two heads of IO about that, and they've talked about it in the past, but they were very frank about some of that stuff and said some things about internally how that was going on that was honest in a way you do not hear from people that high up in a company. So I definitely recommend people check that out, especially when I write it, because I haven't yet. But it's gonna be
You should
great
check
when
it
I
out,
write
too.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also looking
How
forward
many-
to reading it.
How many times did Kane and Lynch come up when you were talking with them, Blake?
Look, I wanted to do this. I thought the stars were aligning for me because one of the last freelance things I was trying to get off the ground was a making of Kane and Lynch 2, because I think the development of that game is fascinating. And it was the first thing I pitched to them when I got assigned to this cover thing. And IO, God bless them, they entertained my idea for a couple days, but finally they were like, we kind of just want to talk about Hitman. Is that cool? And I was like, yeah, all right. I guess I'll
All
stop.
right,
But
fine.
yeah.
Do you know what
So
the
it wasn't brought
original?
up much.
Do you know what the original name for Kane and Lynch, the first Kane and Lynch, was?
No, I don't.
Bad Men.
Really? They are some bad boys.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. And that first
We
game
got
is a
pitched on
bad.
that game for. Yeah, we got pitched on that game for a Game Informer cover, and we're like, yeah, we like it, we'll do it, but you guys got to change the name. So that was an Andy
my
McNamara
working
decision.
My working title is for number 1 is Bad Game, but number
Oh,
2,
hell?
one of those games the last 10
Oh,
years.
no.
Wow.
Wow, Blake.
Wow.
Hmm.
Can't
But
end it
number
on
2,
that,
one of
yeah.
my number 2, my favorite game of the decade. There we go. I'll say that. I think it's fantastic.
Interesting.
Good stuff.
Great. Well, that's Hitman. Games games looks good. Say what you will.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll
Definitely
beat
looking
out
forward to spending more
Blake's.
time with it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. So comes out early next year.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the cover story's out now.
January 20th.
So go read about it while you can. Because you got it, I guess. I don't know.